The rules can be voted on just by the board itself. The board can just come up with rules.
Oh,
and they can,
interesting.
in essence, change them anytime they want to. There's notice procedures. They have to let everybody know they're thinking about doing it, and they have to do it at a notice meeting when people can be there. But for that reason, rules generally do not have the force that of law that a CCNR does. So you cannot contradict your CCNRs by coming up with rules. And I see that happening, where boards kind of go, we really don't like this guy, or we want to make it so that people don't do this, but the CCNRs say they can, so light goes off. Let's just make a rule that they can.
Right.
It's like, well, you can't do that. It's like, it's the same thing with CCNRs. You can't make a CCNR that's contrary to law. You know, you can't create your own fiefdom, and you can't do that with a rule that contradict your CCNR.
I'm Luke Carlson, and for almost 2 decades, my law firm, Ellis Carlson Law, has been at the forefront of defending homeowners against overreaching HOAs. We're not just leading the charge, we've created the go-to playbook on how to fight back effectively. Join us as we delve into the world of HOA disputes, sharing insights from our extensive experience and landmark victories. Throughout this podcast, we'll bring you in-depth interviews, demystify complex legal principles, and provide practical tips to safeguard your rights. While the information provided shouldn't be taken as legal advice, our aim is to empower you with the knowledge, strategies, and real-life success stories needed to navigate and overcome the challenges posed by overreaching HOAs. Hi, Luke Carlson of Ellis Carlson Law. Welcome back to the show, Bad HOA. Today I have Marty joining us, our producer.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And a very special guest, Ryan Davies. He is a partner at Ellis Carlson Law. Davies, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about today because you brought this topic to our attention. I think it's an overlooked topic. And this is, I just bought a home in an HOA. What did I just get myself into? I think that's often overlooked in the market. You know, you find a house that you love, you buy into it, and next thing you know, you're hit with a stack of, governing documents, you're getting notices of board meetings, and you're like, what is this, right? So I think this is going to be very educational. But before we dive in, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where do you go to school? Where do you grow up? Just so the audience knows, what we're dealing with.
Oh, okay. I'm a Southern California guy from birth. Grew up in a place called Santa Barbara, up the way a little bit from here.
Oh, that crummy place, huh? That crummy place, huh?
Yeah, well, it was different in the 70s. I mean, it sounded like an old man with one of those "you should have been here yesterday" stories. Right? No, went to law school up in Oregon, and then came back down here, and been in Orange County the last 25 years.
You've lived in some good places.
Yeah.
You like the coast? Would you live in the coast in Oregon as well?
No, I was more Willamette Valley. You know, that's where most everything is there.
Okay. Yeah.
South of Portland in Salem. But
sure.
am I a beach guy in general? Probably not. It's funny. I mean, look at me. I sunburn in 15 minutes. I'm like the worst guy to have grown up here, but it's what it is. So I've been in the sort of orbit of real estate law for almost all of the 25 years I've been doing this. And, even that kind of dovetailing into what you were just talking about what did I get into with this HOA? I bought my first condo, and I had been a real estate lawyer for 10 years, and I didn't read any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, you think I would be the kind of guy that would check this out, right? No, I didn't. It was back in the fast and furious days leading up to 2008 when people were buying sight unseen, and I didn't look at anything either. So I'm sure that's not unusual.
I think it's very common.
Anybody, should feel upset or down or anything negative for not having fully vetted all of this before buying the house. It's probably more common than not.
Right. And I think with this show, someone who finds himself in this position, really, I think what they can get out of it is best practices.
Yeah.
And not to say, hey, here's a bunch of homework, here's your assignment, you have to read 400 pages of governing documents. But this sort of gives you sort of an idea of what to look for and what to be mindful of as you now live in this community, which can be very beneficial to offset sort of these nightmare situations that we see daily. So with that said, let's dive into it.
Where'd you go to school?
Undergrad, UC Santa Barbara.
What a great school.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then Willamette Law School.
Okay.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Did they have free birds back then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know how long it's been there since my friends went to UCSB, and that was like that was a hallmark that we all went to.
Yeah. I mean, my parents live there, so I still go back to Freebirds every now and then. I got to do it.
That barbecue sauce on the burritos. Who would have thought? It's the best.
Yeah.
All right. So now we laid the foundation. Diving into it, let's ask a very simple question. What is an HOA? We throw it around all the time. We talk about bad HOAs, talk about maybe good HOAs, not as much. Good HOAs.
considering the name of the podcast.
No one calls us and says, hey, my HOA is well functioning. But,
Exactly.
what is an association? In California, HOA, what is it? What are we talking about?
What we're talking about is, the bigger organization, essentially made up of all the homeowners that own property within a particular development that the HOA governs. We use that term. But more the specific answer is 98% of them are corporations. And they function as corporations. They're not the typical corporations you think of as a for-profit corporation. They don't have shares, but they have memberships, and they're nonprofit, but not charitable, not 501c3s,
Right.
but they are organized as corporations. And so as a corporation, they function like corporations.
Or they should.
They have, a board of directors and then officers. Now that distinction is a little muddy in this kind of corporation because they're one and the same. In Apple Computer, you have a board of directors, and the directors are more advisory rather than that.
Sure.
And then they hire the officers, which are your president, CEO,
Right.
treasurer, secretary, et cetera. HOAs will have those roles too, but they are the same.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so it's like say you have 5 directors, and then they'll just pick out of that direct who's going to be the president, vice president, and they all have internal ways of kind of picking that. But that's, I could get into this. It's funny that there's a lot of times some perceived authority being the president.
Right.
Reality is they're all directors. They all get one vote,
Right.
and the director votes determine what's going to happen with the HOA.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's how that works. And it's a volunteer position. They're not paid.
And they're not ever allowed to be paid?
No, not in California.
Not in California. Oh,
And let me
interesting.
ask a nuanced question, because I see this a lot. A lot of our clients or potential clients come to us, and they are so mad at a management company. And there's sort of this notion of, hey, the management company is so horrible. And it sort of gets transposed with the board as well. There's sort of this muddled interpretation of a management company and a board. Maybe we could just define and just sort of simplify that, because it's sort of straightforward, but I think it's worth mentioning the distinction between a board and the management company.
Like a property management
Property
company?
management company, yeah.
Oh, it's totally worth mentioning. Because what a property management company is, they're a vendor. They're no different than the landscapers that the HOA hires. They're hired for that role because people need to interact with the HOA.
Mhm.
And your HOA, the important thing to remember is that board makes all the major decisions.
Right.
But those are volunteers. And so if you're a homeowner, you need the HOA. The guy on the board doesn't want people calling him at 2 a.m. saying, I got a leak in my faucet.
Right.
Or even more simple, some HOAs are big. And, when you're on the board, do you want to be the guy that stamps 300 checks and takes them to the bank every month for the dues? No.
Right.
You hire a management company to do that. Management companies tend to think of them as the customer service of an HOA.
Right. Yeah.
And there is a varying degree of competence there. Great ones can really make it a smooth process. Bad ones can create the problems that people perceive as being with the HOA, but in reality, the management company is the one kind of
Is the
mucking up
driver.
works.
Is the driver.
Or they're the impediment to the free flow of communications a lot of times between the board members who, unless they're non-residents, they're just other homeowners like you.
Right.
And so sometimes when you just talk to these people like common sense, they'll understand it. But when it has to be filtered through a management company, things get a little distorted or twisted, or the management company doesn't convey the right information or tries to solve problems that they have no business solving. They've got no skin in this game. They're hired vendors, just like the landscapers. But sometimes they try and take it upon themselves.
Right.
We could do a whole nother subject.
Yeah, I think
I
that'd
don't
be a
want to
good
go
one.
too far
Yeah.
down the road, but because that's humorous sometimes.
Let me ask you this, though. At the end of the day, since they're hired by the HOA
Mhm.
or the board or directors, or it is their obligation to oversee the property management company. Is that not right? Isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if the property management is incompetent,
Mhm.
it's wouldn't it be the HOA's problem then to try to remedy that situation?
Absolutely.
A good
Because
HOA.
Yeah,
A good HOA.
Yeah, the board decides to hire these people, and they hire them on a contract, whether it's yearly or whatever. But they can certainly terminate the contract and hire somebody better if they need to.
Right.
and they
Yes.
should.
I think it's a really important point though about it being a vendor. I never really thought of it through that lens. If the pool company is not doing a good job at taking care of the pool, then you should step in and take care of that. Say,
Right.
hey,
The
okay,
board should identify that and be proactive and say, hey, this is a bad vendor. We're going to sever ties with this vendor and
Yeah.
find a new vendor.
yeah.
Okay, so let's go into operations. So when you look at an HOA, what do they primarily focus on, or what should they be focused on, or what is their obligations typically? What do they do?
What do they do?
What are they supposed to do?
I was going to say, that's the better question.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
Um,
Everything that we talk about has an asterisk, right?
Exactly. And what they're supposed to do, the way that I think about it and the way that I discuss this when we're dealing with younger lawyers or even in consultations, is that you can kind of boil it down to sort of three main like categories of functions of an HOA is the way I think about it. The first one is a maintenance component
Right.
of common areas, and we can get into what that is in a sec. The second is sort of a community standards function, which is kind of harmonizing the neighborhood, enhancing property values, don't paint your house purple kind of stuff.
Right.
And then there's also a governance and discipline component to it, which is the fact that they have to run themselves, and they're the entity that's ultimately going to be responsible to ensure compliance with things by disciplining people. I mean, this is all civil stuff. You don't call the cops if your neighbor
Right.
paints the house purple. You go to the HOA.
Right. It's internal governance.
Exactly.
And that's the sort of enforcement arm, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So let's go into those categories a little bit more, because these are the three categories, and I think you'd agree with this. This is where we see a lot of the disputes arising, or 99% out of one of these categories. So going to the common area first, because that's a big one.
Yeah, it
I mean,
is.
that's where one that I think vast majority, there's an issue with the common area. And, this issue has now impacted the actual property. There's damage, maybe water intrusion or something along those lines. So let's talk about common area. I guess first, if we're looking at governing documents, where do we find information, or where would a homeowner find information on common area and what those obligations are?
In the definition section of the CCNRs, and then sprinkled through other certain parts, there will be references to this. A lot of times with better drafted CCNRs, there'll be like a maintenance matrix or responsibility matrix at the end that lists out, major components of things like, plumbing or, sink, faucets, toilet wax, rings.
Green belts.
Exactly. And just says, little check boxes of who's responsible for that, whether the HOA is responsible or the homeowner.
Do you see that? Do you see the better CCNRs in a newer community, or it really doesn't matter? It just varies. The people that set them up
Right.
are really good, or they're really bad, or usually the older ones are lack those types of definitions and maintenance schedules.
Yeah, good question. I mean, definitely with the evolution of law, especially in California in this area, there are more things that have to be in there now. So
interesting.
it's more likely to have been done right the first time. But these things can be amended over time.
Yeah.
And so, no matter when they were first done, they can be updated, as time passes. And then sometimes you find them that not updating them, and that can be
That's
a
always
bad
fun
thing.
when you hit
You and I were
the,
talking about that. Mine has CCNRs from 1975.
Yeah, when it's literally on a typewriter. And I've actually seen some. I was working with a client, and they did a actual copy and paste, and then meaning that they cut out something else, they pasted it in. I saw the tape marks, and then they photocopied it, and that was the amendment. It was insane. But you do see that. I mean, that was more of the antiquated approach.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask a question? Is
Sure.
how does one amend those CCNRs? Let's just say that does it need to be voted on by all the homeowners? Does it need to be a majority of homeowners, or is it just carte blanche?
Willy-nilly.
The board can just say, we're passing this.
No, that's CCNRs as far as we could get into what the sort of various governing documents are, but CCNRs are kind of the 800-pound gorilla, and they're the ones that have the most impact and the most importance because those are the ones recorded with the county. And so when you buy in, you're deemed to know what that is because it's a part of your chain of title. So because that's so important, that's one that can only be amended by a vote of the members.
Okay.
And it will say in there, some of them say 51% of the members, period. Some say the default rule in California, for example, is 66%. But that's a 51%, not a majority of the people that vote. That's 51% of everybody.
Oh,
And that's an interesting subject we get into because voter apathy is huge. So it's very difficult to do that.
yeah.
To get 51% of the people in a homeowners association to vote on anything, even if it's free money. have only half the people vote. So
Sure.
that can be difficult to do. But that's one place that you can look
Okay.
for that. It's somewhat of a commonsensical almost kind of concept most of the time, which is common area. And it's funny, there's a legal definition that says anything that's not your separate unit is common area. Lawyers, right? What does that tell me? Nothing. No, but so what it means is, and you have to get into the concept of a separate unit, and a separate unit or separate interest, probably a better term, is what is it that you own? So what did you actually buy?
Right.
And there's a big distinction between properties that are, say, detached homes versus condominiums. Just broad brush strokes here. With a single family home, a detached home, generally you bought that structure. You're going to own the walls. You're going to own the roof. You generally own the dirt underneath it. If you buy a condo or anything that is attached, typically, you are buying airspace. And the airspace is generally bounded by what's inside. The wall's in. Think about it that way. And so you own, and pipes, once they come out of the wall, they're yours.
Right.
But once they go back in that wall, that's the HOA's pipe. Same thing with like plumbing, electrical, anything that's buried behind the walls, probably not yours. Dirt underneath your unit, not yours. You're going to own finished flooring, for example, carpet, tile, wood, whatever you want to be, on top of, here in California, we build on slabs. So that slab is not going to be yours, but what you put on top of it is. And so the distinction there is important because it determines what the HOA has to maintain versus what you have to maintain. So you don't think of it as the HOA owns this floor, because common area is owned percentage-wise by everybody. But my separate interest is what I have to maintain.
And I also think that's important because it defines what you can modify, tinker with, repair, and what you cannot legally.
Exactly.
And you see a lot of these disputes that arise where common area pipe bursts and the homeowner really can't necessarily go in and repair it because it's not theirs to repair in the first place. It falls on the HOA. Or common area roofs.
Exactly.
In a condo, right? It's a common area roof. There's a hole. And typically with the friction or the problem or the point of dispute is the homeowner can't fix it. The association's not fixing it, right? And so what happens? The homeowner just have to sit there and let their unit get destroyed. And so these common area things become very, it's a hotbed for disputes. We've seen that historically. So I think that's an important distinction to make, especially with common area, and especially the piping in the walls.
Yeah, we've talked about that in several situations where a pipe bursts inside the wall and the homeowner can't get a hold of anybody, but they want to repair it, but they have no right to go in there and cut.
Right. So a lot of, like I said, a lot of disputes arise from that issue. And now another interesting thing, though, is you have the CCNRs, and what you'll see from time to time is a set of rules that the association rolls out. And those might be pool rules, tennis court rules. How do those interact with the CCNRs, the governing documents? And sort of what are the protocols there? Because often it's because the CCNRs are silent on a particular issue.
Yeah.
But, over time, the association says, we really need to put hours on the tennis courts. And then there's a separate document. So how do you articulate and classify that separate document? Can you sort of explain that situation?
Yeah. And that's the role of rules and regulations is supposed to be kind of a fill-in. It's to take care of the little details that your CCNRs aren't going to take care of. And the reason for that is, as we discussed, CCNRs have to be voted on by everybody.
Sure.
Whereas rules can be voted on just by the board itself. The board can just come up with rules.
Oh,
and they can,
interesting.
in essence, change them anytime they want to. There's notice procedures. They have to let everybody know they're thinking about doing it, and they have to do it at a notice meeting when people can be there. But for that reason, rules generally do not have the force that of law that a CCNR does. So you cannot contradict your CCNRs by coming up with rules. And I see that happening, where boards kind of go, we really don't like this guy, or we want to make it so that people don't do this, but the CCNRs say they can, so light goes off. Let's just make a rule that they can't.
Right.
It's like, well, you can't do that. It's like, it's the same thing with CCNRs. You can't make a CCNR that's contrary to law. You can't create your own fiefdom, and you can't do that with a rule that contradict your CCNRs. So rules don't have the force there, but rules are more dynamic, that they can be done much.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because often I see the rules as sort of a play to target, harass, selectively enforce because all of a sudden this very bizarre rule comes out. It's inconsistent with the CCNRs. You talk to the homeowner and they're like, yeah, they made this rule because of me,
Yeah.
right? And it's a form of weaponization, in my opinion, right?
Oh, it is.
All right, so that was common areas. Moving to the next function. What do you want to talk about? Because we have two left. We have sort of the fine element of it, and then
Mhm.
there's also the community standards, right?
Let's
Harmony,
do
striking harmony.
community standards real quick, and then we'll get into the fine issue because that's kind of the hot button thing
Yeah.
for people. But community standards also is something that generates a lot of calls to us, et cetera. And the community standards are there to make sure that at least in certain communities that there's kind of harmony in how things look, et cetera. And the way that an HOA will maintain this is if you want to do something with your house that that they don't do,
Yeah.
like paint. And this is where we get into the common area
Right.
thing because detached homes have much bigger impact here in terms of architectural stuff than
Right.
condos do because you're not going to go out and paint your own condo. But when you own your own home, you do. And I shouldn't say that. When you own the wall, the structure,
Right.
you do. And so the way that HOA polices that, so to speak, is they usually have forms that you have to fill out and you have to seek permission of either the board itself, or if they're big enough, they'll have a subcommittee called the architectural committee or something similar. And you submit an application and they'll either approve what you're going to do or not approve it.
Right.
And if they don't approve it, at least here, they're required to tell you what you need to bring it into compliance. And so the goal there is to make sure that people don't do stuff that then you'd have to undo. Again, the whole
Right.
don't paint your house purple stuff. And where we get into problems with that is a lot of times people will do things and not follow this procedure. Homeowners, they'll just kind of either not know about it or they'll look around the neighborhood and go, hey, I like the color of that house. I'm going to paint my house that color without asking for permission.
Right.
And so a lot of people don't like that notion of, this is my house. Why am I asking permission to do something? And it's because you're in an HOA.
Well, and
That's how it works.
I think that
And
goes to the give and take.
It does.
Right. At the end of the day, and I've said this before, a good HOA does actually preserve fair market value.
Right.
Because you're right. You don't want to live next to a zebra house.
Yes.
That's going to pull
Sure.
your house value down. So following certain rules, certain procedures, I don't necessarily have anything wrong with it. I think the big issue though that arises is, hey, I see this house that's purple. I see this house that's purple. I submit my application and I get denied.
Yeah.
Or I know for a fact that those two homeowners never did an application. I followed the rule and somehow I'm getting barred. Or someone else has something that you want to do and you find out, hey, it's the board president's best friend.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
We see that a lot where, the board members all have these nice gazebos in their backyard.
Right.
I applied to build one and they said, no, you
And I got
can't.
shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a huge, that's a flashpoint as well, I think, for disputes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's harmony.
Yes.
Now let's go to the fun one, which is fines, penalties, more of the
Yes.
draconian nature of these micro governments.
Yeah. Micro government is a good, good term there. So if you think about HOA, their biggest obligations, as we talked about, are really maintain common areas and also to enforce these governing documents, CCNRs rules. And so how do they do that? I mean, we use the term micro government. They obviously don't have a police power. They can't arrest you. So what they generally do is if you do something that's violating the rules, they'll send you a notice, or they're supposed to, saying, hey, we think you're in violation. Please cure it within 15 days. If it's something like you trash cans out constantly, you're supposed to pull them in, Monday, stuff like that. Just fix it. If you don't fix it, then they're entitled to set a hearing where they can you have the opportunity to be there and explain your situation, or you can submit something in writing. And again, these are California rules, but they're kind of a notion, that should be everywhere. Just
Right.
basic, you got to be given notice.
It's
and
a due
chance to fix
process
something.
part of it.
Exactly what. And we do see a lot of times HOAs don't follow that.
Right. They go straight to
Right.
fine.
They go straight to sending you a fine because
levy.
we don't like that
Oh,
person,
interesting.
or they're not listening to me. How dare they not listen to
Right.
us? Fine. You see those on the TV commercials.
And that's the power
violation.
struggle.
Violation.
Yeah.
That lady.
Yeah,
Yeah,
was
with
kind
the
of funny.
clipboard.
It was an
and-
Allstate or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a funny commercial. But yeah, that kind of thing. But no, they're supposed to initiate that process. And then if they still have non-compliance all the way down, they can issue a fine. And they can keep issuing fines. Sort of the CCNR should talk about that.
Right.
And that's for the fine aspect. There's a different aspect of how do they police financial matters when, for example, people don't pay. But I don't want to get into the collection stuff.
Sure.
and
Yeah, I
all of
agree.
that.
I agree.
This is more how to encourage or discourage certain behaviors.
Right.
Is the fines, are they outlined much like the rules? And is it a separate document that outlines the fines? And if here's the first violation is X, and then the second is Y. Is it outlined in a fee schedule or?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
At least in
Or
California,
it should
it
be.
is.
Should be.
Yeah, they're required to
They're
have
required.
a policy on the subject and to provide a copy of that policy to homeowners every year,
Okay.
so you know what you're looking at.
Okay.
And even with that, we still have cases that are shocking to me. You think it wouldn't be, but it still is, where you'll see fines just issued, not only sometimes without hearings, but with no relation to what actually happened or a fine schedule.
Yeah, no
We had a
basis.
client who got a fine for $6,000, and they didn't explain it. They just felt like 6,000 was a nice round.
Yeah.
And the typical fines are of first infraction, something like 50.
Yeah.
So you see some definite potential for
Disputes and-
abuse there.
Yeah. Overreach.
Hmm.
Mhm.
All right. I think that was very good. Here's a good question, and we've kind of touched upon this. Are all HOAs terrible?
Only the ones that you guys see.
Only the phone calls we get.
Exactly. It's funny. It's all one of those like confirmation bias things that's all we see.
Right. No, I think what it goes to, though, is, what does a good HOA look like?
Mhm.
What does a bad HOA look like? And what
Right.
are the telltale signs of that?
I mean, how often do you hear anyone say, "Oh, I love my HOA"? You mostly, when you say HOA, is like, "Oh God, an HOA." Like,
Well, everyone has a story.
yeah,
yeah.
there's
If you say you're a lawyer or a real estate lawyer, no one really says anything, but you say, hey, I represent homeowners against bad HOA, 5 people will give you a story because it's so rampant. It's so
Mhm.
everywhere,
yeah.
So again, a bad HOA versus what you would deem as a well-functioning HOA.
Getting back to how they function is what I see a lot is operational type problems, addition to the personality type problems. We get a lot
Right.
of those, and those generate great stories on Reddit and on the
Right.
internet. But we're just talking about an HOA that's functioning as it should, and this notion that it is a corporation run by a board of directors. They make decisions about what are they going to do with money. They have to maintain things. So do they know how to maintain things? Do they know what they should be spending money on? And that's really these people on the board. I mean, how competent are they? In addition to, hopefully they're nice people and reasonable, but there's a competence level too.
Yeah.
We're just using my HOA for an example. I have a condo, and there's 175 units in the development, and we pay $600 a month. So, running the numbers on that, it's about $1.2 million a year.
Right.
So this is a $1.2 million a year business. This
Right.
is not a small rinky-dink.
And then managing
Right.
multi-million dollars worth of real
Right.
estate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's
Oh,
generating
yeah.
the money, and
Yeah.
it's actually having to manage or oversee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much,
Yeah.
if you were to buy the whole community, 170 condos in Southern California, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a big piece of real estate.
Right. And this is run by directors who the only qualification is that they're a homeowner there.
And people liked them.
Yeah. And people like that. So,
Yeah. I know it's
it,
wild.
it really depends on, how good are they? I mean, and you can have you could have a board full of really well-intentioned, reasonable people that may not know anything about roofs. And yet we've got leaks all over the place. And, this is a $2 million project. And so these people are now looking at being a project manager for a $2 million project.
Yeah.
And when they don't do this, and when they don't do proper preventative maintenance, you run into problems. I mean, the worst possible example was Florida 5 or 6 years ago, where that
Yes.
condo tower came
Yeah.
down.
We've talked about that
Inside.
before with the
I'm
Florida
sure we
team.
have.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, those people may have been well-intentioned, just clueless.
Correct.
And look at the horrible consequences there.
Right.
So, on a much smaller scale, it can even be, we see this all the time where people have issues with pipes bursting, things like that, where there's been no maintenance on it, and there's been no money spent on it, and
Right.
nobody's paid attention to it. And some of that too comes down to, is there enough money available to do this? Because you see HOAs that are underfunded chronically. And that's because, it's the same thing almost like politician stuff.
Right.
Nobody wants to campaign for the board on the bench.
Right.
I'm going to raise your dues.
Right.
But on the other hand, there are people out there that, that look at this and go, guys, we have 20% in the kitty of what we really need to fix everything. And then what do you do?
Right.
Mm.
I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. It's not like it's some insurance company that's going to come make it up. So at that point, then they go and, we talk about special assessments where they tell everybody to
Right.
get out your checkbook. So a good HOA is one that stays on top of these things. It ones that manages the money well. It's the ones that don't get overly involved in the personality stuff. It's just sort of trying to keep it harmonious, but
Right.
keep it running.
Yeah,
Maintain the thing.
I think the best association boards that I've seen is people who historically have had a really bad association,
Hmm.
reasonable people who don't necessarily want to join the board, but they do it out of necessity because they say, you know what, these people are doing such a bad job. I want to better the community. I understand CCNRs. I understand this. I don't necessarily want to do it. So it's not a sort of a jump to secure power,
Hmm.
but it's a jump into that seat to do something better. And
Right.
those typically are the most reasonable board members.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
practical, calculated, think about the things, think about the ramifications,
Yeah.
versus the individual who says, oh my God, I want to be board president. This is amazing. What a powerful position I can be in, right? And so when you have that sort of dynamic or DNA in a board, I see
Mhm.
the most problems coming out of those boards or those structures.
Yeah, and it's just sort of, mirrors human behavior psychology.
Right.
That you're always going to have like a core element of the super pro, militant HOA people. And then you're going to have another core group that just hates everything the HOA has done,
Right.
probably because they had a bad experience, and I don't fault them for that. But I would bet, just from what I've seen, doing this for the length of time that I've been, the vast majority are the people in the middle that are kind of like, okay, I got an HOA, I'll send them a check every month, make sure they cut the grass, don't
Right.
bother me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that level is great. I mean, that's how I function, even though I do this for a living. But the problem you run into is then when community has to vote on things, the
Mhm.
people that are kind of like, just don't bother me with this stuff,
Right.
are the ones who really do need to be heard. Because otherwise, you're going to be left with the two camps of people that are, just very psychologically invested in this,
Right.
sometimes to a fault. And so that can be the problem. And when people just sort of like, yeah, it's all right. And
Right.
so you do need people that are willing to put in the time to do it, even though they're not getting paid for it. And that's a big ask.
Right.
Yeah, for
Because,
sure.
they're responsible for running a multi-million-dollar business. And the downside is when people get mad, and people get mad when they get what
Right.
they want, when they want, how they want, all this vitriol and anger is getting dumped on you.
Right.
And you're thinking, I'm not getting anything out of this. What am I doing? And so that can be a problem. But people do need to realize that you do this because it's your money.
Right.
It's your investment.
Yeah.
Well, it's
I
your
mean-
money. It's your property. It's
Yes.
typically the biggest asset you own.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to protect
Mhm.
ultimately. So I have a good question. So this is before you buy into an HOA.
Yeah.
If you could just give maybe 2 or 3 best practices. You don't necessarily want to overwhelm somebody and scare
Mhm.
them into, oh my God, I don't want to spend 20 hours on this. But just generally speaking, your average home buyer who's like, you know what, I love this house. It's in an association. What are some things that they should look into maybe before buying that property?
Okay, well, just a couple quick bullet points, because
Yeah.
I think that would be a good episode in and of
And
itself.
maybe
Oh,
we'll
for
turn that
sure.
into
Yeah,
a whole
yeah,
full-blown
yeah.
one. And I think realtors would really benefit from that too.
Oh yeah,
Because that's something where, a realtor is in a good position to get the information, to
Mhm.
kind of help the potential home buyer get the information, make an informed decision, but just sort of a checklist on this episode of
Mhm.
best practices.
sure. Um, and part of the answer to this question is the same answer as kind of what we're doing today,
Right.
which is, how's this going to affect me? And you want to know that on the front end, and if you don't, then figure it out, kind of after you're in there. And I think the important thing to take away from all this is that there's pros and cons. Especially like a condo is the easiest example. Buy a condo, and con is, yeah, I'm giving up quite a bit of control over this thing. I can't just go out and hire plumbers to tear all the plumbing out and replace it with brand new plumbing if I want to.
Right.
Con, I have to pay every month, which I may or may not want to do. Con, people can tell me what color I can paint my house, if I own a detached. But the pro is I'm paying a set monthly amount for the most part. I don't have to call and hire my own landscaper. I don't have to call and arrange for a roofer. I don't have to
Yeah.
do all this stuff.
Right.
Somebody does it for me, and hopefully they're doing it well. And so knowing that going in, you're making the choice there that I'm giving some things up and I'm getting some things.
Right.
So that brings the question of, okay, what am I really getting versus what am I giving up for my particular use case? And, on the front end, easiest way to do that, I would say look to the rules and regulations. there's a lot more information in CCNRs, but they're dense. Most
Right.
people don't sit there and read them. If you've done a million times like we have, I can spend 10 minutes getting to the part that I would care about.
Right.
So rules and regulations are kind of a good one there because those are the ones that sort of more impact your behavior. As an example, when I bought the current place that I have, now knowing what I know, I have certain hobbies. Like I love to detail cars, et cetera. And I went through and found a great place and I looked at those rules and regulations that said no running water outside. I was like, well,
Gotcha.
that's going to take that hobby away from me. So I'm going to pass on that one.
Yeah.
And, if you have particular things that you want to do and you can look in those rules and regulations and realize, okay, maybe that's not going to happen here. That's something to think about. Also, rules and regulations, just kind of get a sense of, you can read those. See, what are they focusing on? And what kind of depth are they going into? Sometimes you see rules and regulations that are 5 pages long. You kind of go, all right, these people are probably pretty cool. There's one community not too far from here that has rules and regulations that are over 500 pages long.
That might be a
And you
red
look
flag.
at that and you go, wow, there's some people there that spend an awful lot of time worrying about how everybody else lives their lives, don't they? So that would be a red flag to me. So that's just a good kind of idea.
And then what about looking at the community itself? I mean, just driving through it. I mean, of course,
Sure.
you're sort of hyper-focused on the property that you want to buy,
Mhm.
but spending time in the neighborhood, looking at the tennis courts, if they're tennis courts, or the pool, or just the green belt for that matter. How well maintained is it,
Yeah, and that's a really easy one.
Right.
And that's a good rely on your realtor for, local knowledge one.
Yeah.
Because there can be HOAs that are terribly run right next to one that's great. And so, and even if there's comparable pricing, you kind of want to make sure you're in the right one. As a little bit of a deeper dive into that, HOAs are required, at least in California, to put out every year kind of a budget that shows how well they're funded with reserves for future
Right.
maintenance. And the ones that are really underfunded is also something that should scare you because it means they don't really have the money if something bad happens, which means they're going to come to you and say, write me a big check rather than write me your regular. That requires a lot more investigation. Some people probably won't want to go to those lengths, but that would be something I would pay an eye on too. But again, the common area is the common way to look at that is what you just said is look around.
Right.
Are these people spending money on the right things?
I think it'd be easy too if you review the CCNRs and it says that you're not allowed to paint your house whatever, or you're only allowed to paint them these colors, and you're like, well, that's a fuchsia house, that's a pink house. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not.
There you go.
I mean, they're not abiding by their own rules. That's a little bit
Red flag.
red flag.
Yeah.
The other thing that was interesting that you brought up in the past is just looking up the HOA in the courts. Like, look at the
Yeah, I bring that up every now and then. Now that is an extraordinary step, I would say,
Yeah.
but I mean, it doesn't take long. And I think best practice is if you're in Orange County or LA or San Diego, wherever you are, you can go to the court website and do a search on the association itself as the entity, right? So you do a business search, typically business search, and if there's no lawsuits, might be a good thing. Like 7 or 8 lawsuits out of one community, that could be a massive red flag.
Oh, I think that if you could get that information,
Yeah.
and if you could actually, view and read
complaints.
and see what people are actually
Yeah.
suing for,
Or the
But
reverse.
yeah, just the number of them would be the indicator there because one here or there, I probably wouldn't,
Sure.
attach a lot of significance to. There's always, that one.
There's
guy.
some outliers. Yeah.
Exactly. You go to Amazon, you see the reviews. They're always
Yeah.
either 5-star or 1-star. Either
Right.
this is the greatest thing ever, or I hate this thing. You never see a review of a toaster giving it 4 stars, going, it makes toast. So,
It's
so
a
the
love
same
hate.
sort of thing. The extremes are the ones that are going to sue.
Well, I think it's interesting too if you go to the website, if you were to go this extra step and you see that the association has filed 9 lawsuits against the homeowners.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? Because it's two sides of that coin.
Sure.
Are homeowners going after the association or vice versa?
Mm,
So I think both, you look kind of to see what's happening in that community. That's a good indicator.
yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you made that point because I just realized the way I said that almost sounded like if you sue your HOA that you're the problem. Like, oh no.
It could be the other way around.
Sometimes, but most of the time, at least with the people that we represent,
Yeah.
there are people that are legitimately getting taken advantage of. It's unfortunate that it got to the point where they have to do that, but that's usually what we see.
Yeah. Last part of the show, which is Marty's favorite part of the show, he does a Reddit rapid fire. Now,
Okay.
you mentioned Reddit before, so you know that there's a lot of information on Reddit, good and bad, I suppose. So, Marty, if you want to read it, And I always do a disclaimer. Obviously, you're not giving actual legal advice. This is more of an exercise, your thoughts. It's general in nature, but really it's a really quick oral bar exam is what it is. Kind of fun.
No pressure. All right, here we go. I just bought my first home, and it's in an HOA neighborhood. During the purchase process, I was told the monthly dues were $250, which seemed reasonable for the amenities. I closed last week and just received my first HOA bill. It's $350. When I called to ask about the discrepancy, they said there was a special assessment, in quotes, approved last month for roof repairs in the community. They're claiming I'm responsible, even though this was never disclosed during my purchase. The seller did not mention it either. Am I really on the hook for this? Is there anything I can do?
Yes, you're on the hook for this, because it's an aspect of the ownership. The fact that you weren't told about it, that was an interesting. I'm assuming that's kind of typed out of Reddit, because what would be the key to me as a lawyer is who was the one that didn't tell you. Because the HOA has no real obligation to you before you're a member of it.
Sure.
So that is a seller-buyer issue. So if you're buying and your seller represented to you that, it's only $250, don't worry about it, and then you turn in and it's not, then that's a misrepresentation by the seller. And actually, even in California, when you're doing a sale, there's 150 pages of required forms, and one of them has those boxes in it. It says, if this is an HOA, are there any planned increases? Are you aware of any special assessments coming up? So people need to have that information and know what they're getting.
So yeah, interestingly enough, that becomes actually a non-HOA dispute.
It is.
That is a typically car form non-disclosure situation.
I find it interesting though. This is just, again, the subreddit is just people complaining about their HOAs. And this is a perfect example of people like, I hate these HOAs, because of X, Y, and Z. And this has nothing to do with the HOA themselves. Right. This is all about a potential non-disclosure issue.
Might even be a realtor issue too.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and actually, that $350 there may be an entirely good thing if they've got roofs. They want to repair the roof before it starts leaking and trashing all of your stuff.
Right.
Well, they're first-time home buyer too, right. So it's like
shock.
But they should have had they should have been presented with the information to decide, okay, am I going to do this? It's going to cost me more, but I'll live in a place with a brand new roof. Again, trade-offs.
Yeah.
And if they say, hey, it's just out of my budget, then no,
yeah,
should have known. So a non-HOA dispute arising from an HOA issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. It happens.
Ryan, I can't thank you enough. I think that was very informative.
That was great.
Yeah,
good.
That was good.
Glad we could do this.
And hope to have you back soon. And I think maybe next time we actually do a deep dive into before you buy into an HOA.
Yeah,
best practices.
That's a good one.
So everyone, thank you for watching. And if you can, feel free to subscribe, like the video, and then leave comments because we do look at the comments. And until next time, we'll see you then.